Welcome, everyone, to the November 2022 edition of Cabaret Conversations from the 92nd Street Y School of Music. I, as always, am your host, Michael Kirk Lane, and I am absolutely thrilled this month to be joined by a theatrical legend. He has been seen on Broadway in Guys and Dolls, The Wiz, Ain't Misbehavin', and of course, Cats, along with the filmed version that I wore out the VHS to when I was in high school. He, of course, has also been seen on film in Torch Song Trilogy, Dreamgirls, All Dogs Go to Heaven, and of course is most known as the voice of Oogie Boogie in The Nightmare Before Christmas. He has performed in cabarets and concert stages around the world. Please welcome to Cabaret Conversations, the marvelous Ken Page.
Hello, hello,
Hello, how
hello,
are you?
everybody. I'm wonderful. How are you?
Oh, I'm just so excited to have you join this series. I've been looking forward to this so much in the months since you said yes that you'd be able to join me.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. So
I
glad.
I always like to know as we start out where an artist is coming from. So let's start at the beginning of your theatrical and performance journey back in St. Louis. Who were those initial teachers and mentors that were like, "You've got this. Let's encourage this."
Well, I was very lucky from an early age. I was part of a children's chorus. They actually, I guess you would have to say, they bused us to the
Mm.
school, which was, excuse me, an all-white school, and we were an all-black parish. And they took about 8 of us on Fridays to go and sing with this chorus. And the nun, I went to Catholic school, the nun who was teaching the course, leading the course, was a wonderful nun named Sister Ruth Cecilia, who later became Lois Zitzman as she left the convent. Anyway, it started with her. Um, that was where the music training started. And then when I was in about, I think, seventh grade, they brought her to our school,
Mm.
fortunately. Yeah. And she came to our school. We had no music programs, no speech, nothing like that. And she came to the school and she initiated a music program. She went around and begged up instruments. She begged musicians to come and teach us. She got us involved in an intramural speech league in St. Louis. I think it's still in operation, called the Bellarmine Speech League. And I knew of it because my cousin was a participant and where he went to school. So anyway, she got our school involved. We ended up taking first and second place. We just did really wonderfully. But for me, that was the beginning of what I would like to say was my training, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, and I'll never forget one day I was working on a speech and I was a very shy kid and, the whole nine, bullied and the whole thing.
Mm.
But she said to me in the room, she said, okay, do you want to do this? I said, yeah, I want to do it. She said, then you're going to have to speak up. You're going to have to be strong. And you have to blah, 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 blah. Now you make a decision today because otherwise you're wasting your time. You're wasting my time. Now I was in the
Mm.
seventh grade, right? That's a big decision to make it. But you know what? That one decision changed my life. One day
Mm.
in a room with this nun changed my whole life when she said, do you want to do this? And I thought to myself, yes, I do. And I will step out of my comfort zone to do it well. And
Mm.
that opened the door to everything else after. So she was my first teacher and later, of course, a friend. And she even fought to get myself and my best friend into a high school, which was out of our diocese district, they called it at the time, so that we could continue to study speech and
Mm.
music. Because the school that we would have gone to had nothing. Once again, it was one of those, sort of athletics
Mm-hmm.
oriented, whatever. And she got them to bend the rules and let us go to this school, which was the next phase of my training. Excuse me, where I did, the musicals
Mm-hmm.
and continued to take voice lessons and speech and drama. And that was the second half. And I had wonderful teachers there, one of whom had gone to the university that I ended up going to from high school. My teacher, Mary Lee Hummert, was her name, lovely young lady. And she, when the time came for us to start thinking about where we wanted to go to college and blah, 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 blah. And I auditioned. Actually, I went up for 3 things. I went up for the voice scholarship, which was a very academic, sort of classical training. And I went up for the theater scholarship, which was a theater. training. And I also went for the art department because I am an artist. I like, it's hard for me to even say it because I've done it so long. But I actually got a scholarship in each department. And I thought to myself, well, the voice department, you couldn't do anything else. They were very rigid and they wanted you to study, and you had a projected escalation as you went through your 4 years, and that was it, you know. And it was classical. You know, you didn't, art took up a lot of time because there were double classes where you did things and so forth. So I said theater, which I of course loved, was the one where I could sort of incorporate them all. I could still sing and I could still take voice lessons. And if I wanted to do art, I could. Of course, we took set design and all that sort of thing. So I kind of parlayed that into that. And that was the third sort of installment where I was in college and I had an amazing teacher mentors, three, but one in particular, Gordon Garner. He had been an actor in New York and Hollywood. I always like to say he was the mail boy on I Love Lucy, which was always, and then people go, are you kidding? I said, no. He was the mail boy in I Love Lucy, and he was in My Darling Clementine with Henry Fonda and so forth. And he also was one of the starting people in the group with Jose Quintero and Colleen Dewhurst and all those people at the original Circle in the Square. So he was a very well-rounded teacher. But what was the best part of it for me was not only the academics of theater, but he also taught me about the business and show business. Important. So important. And I think he knew that I wanted to do it professionally, and it manifested because when I decided to leave and go to New York, I had done 2 summers of stock at the Muni by then and got my equity card. And I decided I wanted to go to New York, and privately he said, I think you should. And he gave me some great inspiration and instructions. So that was that part of it as far as St. Louis. And I got on a train and I went to New York. So that's the beginnings, you know.
Just, did you ever finish your degree, or did it just take off from there?
Yeah. It took, I got to New York, and within a year I was on Broadway. So by the time my class graduated, you know, as seniors, I was in my, I want to say, second Broadway show by then. So I say that's my degree.
It's the degree of life.
It's certainly the degree of the business and the theater. You know, I was doing, and something he said that I thought was also very impacting. He says, in the time you have in New York, if you go to take class and do these things, or just your experience, will give you what you would spend the next 2 years here learning. So go, apply yourself, keep your eyes open, learn, blah, blah, blah. And that's what I did.
And Guys and Dolls was first.
Guys and Dolls was first. A lot of IMDb and whatever, for some reason, they've juxtaposed that with The Wiz. And they always say, he made his Broadway debut in The Wiz, which I did not do. And I don't think Ted Ross, who originated the role of the line, would appreciate that much. God rest him. But I made my Broadway debut in Guys and Dolls, 1976.
What was that experience like? So new, still new to the city, so young to be making.
So young, so fast, so full of fire and music. Well, you know, it was amazing because, I mean, again, I had done it the last national tour, Pearly, beforehand. But to get a Broadway show, you know, within a year of being there, more or less, was pretty amazing. And of course, Guys and Dolls, which I knew well because I knew you know, I'd studied musical theater. So, but to get that opportunity, I was 21, and to get that opportunity and have it be as successful as it was for me was storybook time. It was really like a storybook. You know, you're 21, you're full of fire and music and all that, and you get a show where you get these incredible numbers like Guys and Dolls and Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat to sing. And because of the way the show was constructed, I got to do this addition to Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat, which was a gospel encore to it, which was very, very effective. The audience seemed to like it a lot. And that sort of thrusted me into the middle of the New York theater, musical theater world immediately. But that's also the first place that I when I was doing Guys and Dolls, was the first time I did my, as we called them in the day, nightclub act.
Your nightclub act.
Yeah.
Where did you do your first nightclub act? What club?
Believe it or not, and this is, people think I make it up, but I'm not making it up. When I was doing Guys and Dolls, I did my first nightclub act at a club called Big Julie's.
Oh. For those of you who don't know, that's a character in Guys and
In
Dolls.
Guys and Dolls. He's the guy that comes in from Chicago, the big wheeled, big roller. And I did it there.
Mm-hmm.
I had done an article for People magazine in their lookout section. I don't know if they even still have that, but anyway, they had it then. And they profiled me from Guys and Dolls, and they asked me then, what would you like to do other than this? And my teacher, Don Garner, had told me, he said, try to do a cabaret act, do something where you can express yourself. So I said, I'd like to do a cabaret act. I'd like to do my own show. And they put it in the magazine, and I got a call from the proprietors at Big Julie's offering me, I think it was a 2-week late night stint to play the club, and they paid more money than I was making on Broadway, which I thought was hysterical.
Oh, if that was still the way in Cabaret.
Oh, if it only were still the way. And Billy Wilson, who was our director on Guys and Dolls, directed it. Bernard Johnson, our costume designer, did costumes for it. Danny Holgate, who was our musical director, arranger, put all the music together. And these 3 wonderful ladies, one of whom is still one of my best friends. 2 of them are still friends. Susan Edwards is a friend, and Helen Gelzer is like my soulmate sister person. But we go back that far. She and I had done Pearly together. So that was my first club act. And I tell in my show, page by page, that what I found out was that the actual room was kind of a pickup room for ladies of the evening.
Oh.
And the men who loved them. And it was very classy, mind you, but it was kind of like a built-in audience because there was always somebody there. And I kept noticing the same ladies were there, and I thought, well, they either really like me or, and it took me a minute to kind of cotton on to the fact that, oh, that's what's going on in here. And there were regular pay customers, but there was a sort of
a built-in clientele,
yes,
who was looking for their own clientele.
Yes. And they were very demonstrative because that was what the entertainment was. And it was terrific. It was a great booking, but it was a very eye-opening experience at 21.
What was your biggest takeaway from that first nightclub act? About this art form, about the difference in it?
Well, it was, I guess I would say it allowed me for the first time. Of course, you put an act together, so you have to know what you want to say or sing, whichever way you look at it. So it made me cross that bridge without really even realizing. I was just putting a show together. What do you want to sing? Oh, I want to sing this. I want to sing that. And it forced me to articulate who I at least thought I was, at 21, who I thought I was, and to present that to an audience in an intimate way. You're in a Broadway show and it's big and you've got all the people around you and it's a big orchestra and all these things. And then you go to a cabaret where I think I had 5 pieces accompany me, but it's so much smaller and it's so much more intimate, and you can't hide behind anything unless you're doing a sort of a character act where you're pretending to be something and that's your act. You have to present yourself, and you have to present your honest emotions and your honest thoughts about things, and the patter and all that stuff was really big at the time. So it really forced me to move ahead in a way that I hadn't anticipated. So the takeaway, I would say, was that it made me define myself. And then I got reviewed for that, and it became Ken Page's Cabaret show. And that was a separate entity than my Broadway work, and it continued from there.
You started in the cabaret world in such an interesting heyday in the art form.
Yeah.
The late 70s through the 80s. There were so many clubs. Everybody was doing their acts. Who were the artists that you were going to see then that you thought, this is the epitome of this art form? This is who I need to be watching.
Right. Oh, yeah. And there were so many wonderful, wonderful people. The ones that come to mind right away, the first club act that I saw was a wonderful group way ahead of their time because they were openly gay, a group called Gotham. And I'm sure they're mentioned in the book we talked about previously, Intimate Nights. They were amazing. And their act was pinpoint perfect. They'd done it. It was 3 guys. They sang harmony. And that was because they were part of a group of people that I was friends with when I first got there. and they were like, you have to see Gotham. So we went to Brothers and Sisters,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe, what I forget what it is now, if it's anything, but we went there to see them. And that was the first time I saw a nightclub act, or what it was and how it worked and what it felt like and so on, you know. And I saw them, and I think the second person I saw was Elena Reed, and she was very, very big on the cabaret circuit. Most people who know her will know her from being on the sitcom 227 with Jackie Harry
Mm-hmm.
and Marla Gibbs. But she was a big
And she was
cabaret
on
name.
Sesame Street for a while.
Yes, yes, yes,
That's
she
why I
was.
know her.
That's right. That's right. And but she was like the queen of the cabaret circuit at that time, because she did her act consistently
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. And I should note that it was just maybe a year or two after, maybe a little longer, but it was still resonant, that Bette Midler had been at the Continental Baths.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody was doing their act. You know what I mean? And it had happened before, of course, in the 50s and so forth.
Right.
But it was sort of a resurgence in a certain way because it had a different energy. But there were so many people. And the first sort of bigger act that I saw was Chita Rivera at the grand
Mm-hmm.
finale. And my goodness, it was just amazing. Because imagine, first of all, we all know Chita Rivera is the ultimate performer and so
Mm-hmm.
personable and all those things. But you got to see that in a 150, maybe 100-seat room. And it was pretty amazing to watch. I always remember, and I told her later as I got to meet her and became friends, I said, I was always amazed how you could do a high kick in this low ceilinged room and never kick the ceiling out. And she said, oh, honey, we worked on that. She says, I would do a plie, and the boys would sort of do a plie, and then I would kick from the plie, so that I was never actually kicking all the way up. I was already down, and then I would kick. Because it was no, I mean, you think she's going to kick the
Mm-hmm.
ceiling out, but she had it worked out. But her act was terrific, terrific, terrific.
It
So those
still
three,
is.
oh, it is, absolutely. And I've seen her many times in many different forms and venues since then. And so those were the three people that I remember. But they were amazing people. There was a club called Reno Sweeney's,
Mm-hmm.
which was, I think, probably the most notable club at the time for our group, my group. And it was a goal of mine, even though I had opened my act at Big Julie's. It was really always a goal of mine to play Reno Sweeney's, because everybody, Peter Allen did Reno Sweeney's, and all sorts of people of note,
Mm-hmm.
along with just the cabaret people from the time. And I thought, until I play Reno Sweeney's, I haven't made it in the cabaret world. And when I did Ain't Misbehaving on Broadway, I finally got to play Reno Sweeney's, in the back end of its heyday, but I still got to do it, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the people that I saw first and really made an impression on me. And they were good because they were sort of the ultimate versions of what
Right.
those things were, you know?
How is your approach to cabaret different from your approach to musical theater?
Well, I think inherently it's the difference in what it demands and what it restricts you to. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you're in the musical theater, you're behind the fourth wall, you've got an orchestra, you've got other people up there with you, you've got a story to play that someone has written in terms of the book, you've got songs to sing that someone has written in terms of their expression, and you're a piece of that puzzle, a wonderful piece. I love, doing.
Mm-hmm.
But with cabaret, it really is an intimate art form. And we can go back to the English version or the German version or the French version. It's always been that thing, you know. Um, and I always like to think of it in a more poetic way. It's like, it's where you can bare your soul. You can let people see who you really are. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you may construct that in terms of what you present to them, but it's pretty hard to hide in cabaret. And I
Yeah.
think that's why so many really unique artists came out of that, because they were able to be the ultimate versions of themselves. Bette Midler, Barbara Streisand,
Mm-hmm.
on and on and on. Peter Allen, like I said, Elena Reed, many, many people came from that, because that was where your persona, they called it back then too.
Mm-hmm.
You built on that. If you had a certain kind of flair, a certain kind of something, something, you built on that, and that's what your act was.
Do you remember probably about 10 years ago, 15 years ago now, title of show. This was on Broadway.
Mm.
And they were playing versions of themselves. The cast was all playing versions of themselves. And they coined a term that I've used since in when I'm teaching cabaret and when I'm performing.
Mm.
And that is, in cabaret, you're you in quotes, you're the bunny ears version of yourself.
I think that's true sometimes. I don't think it's always true, because
Mm-hmm.
I think some people are very much not that. They're just purely who they are. They're not playing a version of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's often true, because I think for some people to package themselves in a way that allows them to be a now we say brand, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
you have to sort of do that. And I guess I would have to say too, maybe to some degree, everybody has to do it a little bit, but it's the difference between putting on an act, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and being yourself in an act. And I think there's a difference. I've seen shows where people come out and they're sort of on, and they're wonderfully engaging and wonderful to see and so forth, but it's not the same as when you go see somebody and they walk out on the stage and they strip away everything and reveal themselves to you in their music and in their choices even, and the songs and the music and what they sing and how they sing it. I think there's a little bit of difference there. Both are viable, I think. But I think that you could go name by name of people you could think of and categorize them in those different ways.
There is something that comes in the intimate rooms that we play that it becomes, and I think you said this in an interview I watched of yours, we have this shared humanity that comes in because it's such an intimate setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, you feel that in a certain way in the theater, but it's almost like an electricity that you have to just sort of latch on to. And right in the cabaret room, it's real. They're right there in front of you. If someone is crying or laughing or something, you see them.
Or the waiter drops a tray of drinks.
Absolutely. It's all part of the act, as they used to say, you know. And something I was told by Jeffrey Holder wonderfully, he said, nobody knows you made a mistake unless you let them know you made a mistake. And unless it's to your benefit, don't let them know you made a mistake. You know, if you forget a lyric, just use it. Make it part of the honesty is the point, you know? And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy the most about audiences in a cabaret setting is you're looking right into their eyes. You're not looking in a dark space where you know people are watching you. You are really literally, for the most part, looking into their faces, and you have to open up and communicate. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It doesn't happen, you know? And it is an intimate exchange, very. And I've had times when I've been emotionally moved by the way the audience is reacting. You know, you have the thing set where I'm going to sing the song and it has this feeling to it or this story or whatever, but you begin to feel the energy of the audience as part of the experience, not just what you intended to do. And it can be very impacting. And it's almost like a relationship for that hour and a half or hour. You're in it with them. It only exists in that moment. It only exists between you and them in that particular time at that particular place.
The audience can become, in some ways, your scene partner in the fact that as you're revealing your truth through these lyrics.
That's right.
They're then feeling, and you can get their truth back.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the beautiful things too about it, is that you know when you're singing certain things that there are people. I always love it when you start a song and maybe it's a sort of familiar song or very familiar song, and you get that reaction from the audience. If you say, the sun comes out and I think about you, and you hear, oh, you know, and it's not only the song, it's the song's sentiment and what they might relate to it. That's part of what's happening, the energy that's going between you and them. It's really great. I love that.
Well, you and I could obviously keep talking forever, but I feel like the participants in the audience are waiting for me to show our first clip of the evening.
Sure, sure.
So let's go. Since we mentioned Reno Sweeney's, let's go to the one you and I were talking about from the Reno Sweeney days.
I used to hear all the time when I was in high school and thought I was so mature that I knew everything. And I used to listen to this song and I'd think, well, I know what that means. Well, the time in between, some of the things that have happened, some of the friends that are gone, some of the things I've done and haven't done, have made me realize what this song really means. And I thought about doing it tonight, and I hope it means something to some of you. My father sits at night with no lights on. His cigarette glows in the dark. The living room is still. I pass by, no remarks. I tiptoe past the master bedroom where my mother reads her magazines. I hear her call sweet dreams, and I forgot how it used to be. And you say it's time we moved in together and raised a family of our own, you and me. Well, that's the way I've always heard it should be. You wanna marry me? From college, they're all married now. They have their houses and their loves. They have their silent tears, angry nights, and tearful dawns. Their children hate them for the things they are. They hate themselves for what they're not. And yet they drink, they laugh, close the wounds, hide the scars. Say it's time we moved in together and raised a family of our own, you and me. Well, that's the way we've always heard that it should be. You wanna marry me? Keep our love alive. Babe, all I know is what I see. The couples cling and claw and drown in love's debris. You say we'll soar like two birds through the clouds, but soon you'll cage me on a shelf. I'll never learn to be just me first by myself. Can you say it's time we
What does it bring back having?
Oh my goodness. Uh, well, I don't know. I was thinking of 100 different things. I should note that that was the Reno Sweeney's Cabaret reunion, which was it was a 3-day event, but it was held at the Bottom Line because Reno's had just closed, it was closing, and they wanted to have a reunion of all the people that had played Reno Sweeney's. And like I said, it was a 3-day thing, and all kinds of people performed it. Lita Galloway and Elena Reed and Peter Allen and Novella Nelson and Holly Woodlawn and all of these people. It was quite a varied group, but that's what Reno's was, right? All of these amazing people. So it really was like a class reunion of that whole period, because it's sort of with Reno's closing, it continued, but it was sort of the end of an era of a sort, you know. And Bottom Line, I should note, was also an amazing club to play, but it was more of a rock and roll kind of. It's the next version of that thing, you know.
You're saying, that was the end of an era, and it very much was. I mean, the cabaret world has changed so much since then.
Yeah.
What are the biggest changes you've noticed in the world of cabaret?
Well, I think it did a turnaround on itself. There was a minute there where it just sort of disappeared a little bit. I mean, it never went away, but it felt like it disappeared a little bit, you know. And it sort of I think it came from the same things it always came from. People wanting a venue to express themselves. And I think it came back around probably from what I can suss out, from like the early 90s, somewhere around in there, if maybe not the late 80s. People started to just get up and sing. They started to say, well, you know what, I'm going to be at Don't Tell Mama, I'm going to be at wherever these places, and I'm going to sing some songs, come see me. And what I remembered, at least from because I was in California during this, from 84 to 94, and I would hear sort of the whispers of who was doing cabaret in New York. And it was very different because it wasn't the prolific amount of people that there had been. But it was beginning to really start up again, at least from what I could see. I would note that also in LA, which is of course not really known for the same kind of things New York is known for, but it had and has, but again, in a period, it had a cabaret scene. And of course, when I went there, I sought it out, you know.
As we do.
As you do. And there was a place there, the first place, I think it might have been the first place, yeah, called the New York Company Bar and Grill, believe it or not, in LA, over in Silver Lake. And I did my show there, and at the back lot, which was this wonderful Studio One back lot, which was kind of the Reno Sweeney's of LA in a lot of ways. Everybody did their shows there. And it was connected to this big disco, but it was kind of the room to play. Carlos and Charlie's, I opened for Joan Rivers there. All kind, there were all these places, and I just did them all, And for that same reason, going back to your question, I just kept wanting to express myself, because it was even more so in LA, because you're not doing musical theater for the most part. So that whole part of anyone, their talent, if you will, that wasn't part of the scene there. So part of the business, I should say. So when you got to do that, it was, and of course, by this point, I call them the pilgrims. A lot of us had moved to LA from New York of that same time period we talk about, right? Elena Reed was there, and Holly Woodlawn was there, and Ellen Green was there, and everybody was there. So all of those people became the populists of the cabaret scene in LA. And of course, many, many people who had moved there just, trying to do whatever, came to see the shows. So it had its own sort of a renaissance. But during that time, I remembered hearing that cabaret was starting to start up again, more or less, in New York. Because again, I would note that a lot of the people who were, I won't say architects, but they were the denizens of the cabaret world. They all moved to Los Angeles at a period in time, like late, early 80s into the, people just by droves, because everybody wanted to do film, they wanted to do TV. So it changed the talent pool for cabaret immensely and immediately. So it kind of had to have birth pangs again with new people who were wanting to do it, and rooms that were open to it. A lot of the places closed. And they had to find new places, and some rooms became, I think I did my show at a place called Barbara Ann's, which nobody remembers, but Barbara Ann's became Don't Tell Mama. Believe it or not, it was a room and it was further in the back and it was reconfigured, but it was there. But there was sort of a rebirth. I remember when I found that out, I said, "Where is that?" And they said where it was. I said, "Did there used to be a club there called Barbara Ann's?" And only one or two people from the old days, if you will, went, "Yes, that's where Barbara Ann's was." Trudy Heller's, all these places. But a lot of them closed down at that same time. And the rebirth started again, from what I could find out.
And I feel like that's happened probably 2 more times since then.
Probably.
I think, and we've obviously had some changes to the cabaret world due to COVID and how that has changed the arts.
Well, we should also note that the AIDS epidemic had a lot to do, because people weren't, the core bases of the cabaret world were gay people, gay men mostly. And once AIDS set in, and that was around 83, 4, around in there, of course, all the things that went along with it, the stigmatization and so forth, the people,
the generation of artists,
it
in
just
this cabaret
wiped
world
out
that we lost.
a whole generation, just went away. And also people were paranoid about being in the places like that, So all of that affected that decline, that original first decline that happened. And then, of course, like you said, we've had more recently COVID, and, it always affects the cabaret world.
To the AIDS epidemic, I've spoken to people of my generation of this art form, and we're lucky to have the couple of mentors and teachers that we have from generation above us.
That's correct.
Because
very much
the people who should have been our leaders and mentors were lost in the
That's
art
right. That is correct. I mean, I remember the last night of the Reno Sweeney's Cabaret Union, a wonderful man named Michael Callan, I believe was his name. He wrote a wonderful song called Love Don't Need a Reason. And it became almost the anthem of the whole cabaret weekend, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because so many people were missing by then. From that world, and he himself was HIV positive and already suffering and so forth. So there was this underlying sentiment to everybody getting together for this quote unquote one last time to raise the roof about the cabaret world, because basically it couldn't exist at that time the way it had, because there were so many people who owned the clubs, who ran the rooms. They were gone. So it made a big difference, but it was so beautiful to have that happen, because it sort of saluted all those people that were not there by the ones who were there. And something you said I think is also very important is a lot of the mentors, the people who were in front of my generation, they aged out. Some of them went away with AIDS and blah, 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 blah. But the young people behind us by a generation or two didn't necessarily have that, because like I said, a lot of us moved to California. So there was a gap in the way it passed down. We, when I came and everybody was raving and still talking about middle at the baths and blah, 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 and so we had that to look at as an example of what it was. And like I said, there were so many people doing it that all you had to do, I remember at the grand finale for Coca-Cola, you could stand at the bar in the back, which was only maybe 30 feet from the stage, but you couldn't sit at a table. And at that time, people like myself, we didn't have any money. We were, young kids. There was a place I used to go on, I want to say 75th and Broadway. And the name of it just went out of my head, but Lisa Raggio used to sing there all the time, and Harriet Leiter. And these were people of another group, so to speak. And I always loved, Lisa always sang A Sail Away. And her Lion Tamer from Magic Show. She'd been in Lion Tamer. I had been in Magic Show. And Harriet Leiter's big song was Bet You By Golly Wow. She was in the movie Torch Song Trilogy, by the way. If anybody watches, she's the announcer in the club. That's how beloved she was. Harvey said, no, we got to have Harriet in this movie, So, a lot of that changed. But the glory of it, on a personal level was at least we were all together in California. We could all see each other. And if anybody had the nerve to get up and do their act, you know, you could go, and you look around the room and it was all the same people from back in the day in New York. It was great.
Some people point that we might be currently in a new heyday renaissance moment for this art form. It was starting a little bit pre-pandemic, but it's now picked up again. Definitely picked up again post-pandemic. One, maybe because people were longing for that intimate connection that Cabaret can offer, especially as, you know, 54 and Green Room 42 and these clubs and Mamas were reopening before Broadway was allowed to reopen.
That's right. Well, you know, also, people have something to sing about. They have something to say. They have feelings that they need to share. People in the audience need to hear it. And I think with COVID and the loss that produced for so many people, again, Cabaret is a truth room. You go in there and you hear people really tell the truth about the world and the situation and how they're feeling. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people need that. They need to go somewhere and see that in an art form. You know, I was talking to Natalie Douglas, who I adore, and who is a mainstay, right, of the cabaret world in New York. I said, look, don't tell anybody, but I think you're the queen of the cabaret world in New York. And she said, there are those who would disagree with you. I said, well, I'm not among them, you know. I always put Marilyn May in a group by herself, so there's that, you know. But people who, you know, they like I said, I think it's had a rebirth, if you will, because again, we're in a time, and we're not out of it. We're in a time where there's a lot of discourse. And I think Cabaret is one of those rooms. I just saw Amanda McBroom in Palm Springs at the Purple Room, which is a wonderful room, which I hope to. But her show was, again, she's always wonderful. But interestingly, at the end of her show, of course, you know, she wrote the song The Rose, which Bette made so famous. Well, my goodness, it's totally informative, like, all over, with a completely different consciousness in the time we're in and what's going on and all of that. And the way she framed it, she says, well, she told the story about finally meeting Bette a few years ago at Birdland there. But she said, but this song, which I wrote and blah, 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 and was certainly beautiful and meaningful then, she said, but now we're in another place where we need to hear that again. That underneath the bitter snow lies the rose, the seed that becomes the rose. We need to hear that again, because again, we're in a place where you're just wondering what the hell is going to go on. And in Cabaret, it's the truth place. You can hear that, you know. And she did a
Cabaret as an art form is, unlike any of the other performing arts, really about the lyric.
Yeah, it's about the storytelling.
It's not, it's not necessarily about the melody or the beautiful instrument you have. It's communicating that story through the lyric.
Yeah. Well, I think it can be. We shouldn't count out people who have gorgeous, amazing voices. But the thing is, you have to, well, it really has to do with the intimacy. If you don't have something to say, there's really no reason to be up there. You know, if it's just to sing your, like you said, to let people hear your glorious voice, that's kind of an empty experience in an intimate setting. If it's just to sing music that you like, it doesn't communicate much. And I think there's people who are there for that and they love it and that's fine. But I think when somebody has something to say and they pick material, be it known or unknown or original, that is saying something to the audience, that is the bedrock of the cabaret idiom. There's something to say. And like you said, it's the lyric. I mean, for me, I always look at a lyric first, you know, even if I'm not crazy about the melody, I look at the lyric first and see if I can make it work. If I really want to do it, it's always about the lyric and it's always about the storytelling. If you're not, to me, if you're not saying something in the lyric, then you're not servicing the art form of cabaret.
As you're structuring your shows, do you take the same show that would play New York throughout the country? Do you make changes to it for different audiences in different areas?
Yeah, you have to. You know, I've done my show all over the place, and I actually, for a long time, traveled all over the country doing it. And I had a basic show. It came out of the piece I put together, 2-act Then go page by page,
Mhm.
which was an autobiographical journey up to the point I was at when I wrote it. But going out in the hinterland and around, some of the things that were in there were not in their experience. And I knew that. And again, because of the forum, I thought there's no point in presenting something to them that they don't relate to.
Mhm.
You can push the envelope, but you still want them to be able to understand where you're coming from, you know. And that's a wide berth, you know, it's not that narrow. But definitely you do. When I do New York, well, it's like coming home, isn't it? You can do anything because you know somebody out there is going to know exactly what you're talking about. And there's material that you may not do other places because it's a little more experiential to a cosmopolitan, metropolitan lifestyle.
Mhm.
And while they might enjoy you singing it, like you said, they won't necessarily relate to the story of it. And that always has to come first. So I do iterations of my show. I change it and take this number, I put that number in, you know. When I did 54 Below this past May,
Mhm.
um, it was interesting because I'd started working on the show and done versions of it at the Jazz Bistro in St. Louis. But when it came time for New York, I knew, well, now I can really do all the material that I thought I might like to do, and they'll take the ride with me.
Mhm.
And that's not because the audience here in St. Louis is very sophisticated that way because they see everybody when he comes here. But I hadn't gotten myself to the point where I was ready to do that material, some of it, in the same way. And when I did that there again, I wanted to do things that weren't as much theatrical as they were more intimate and cabaret
Mhm.
intended. The show that I did in St. Louis had a little bit more of a theatrical flair because I knew that was kind of what people would appreciate the most. So it's always great to do New York, you know, because of that. You can really go in with the most core part of any intimate story you want to tell, and they're there for it.
Mhm.
You know, they're living it, or they've lived it, or you know, something like that.
Obviously, we've had a lot of people on this series who are musical theater performers, and I've had a little conversation tonight about musical theater versus cabaret. You are the first person who is really a prolific voiceover artist
Ah,
who has been part of the series.
ah.
So I'm interested to ask you correlations or differences you find, because both art forms are so much of using your voice in a storytelling element.
Yes.
Do you find correlation between the two? Do you approach them at all the same?
Not really, no, because the voiceover work that I've done, namely, let's say Nightmare Before Christmas, you're creating a character and it's going to be
Mhm.
visualized in a way that is not you. I mean, it's a, you know, whatever, it's animation. But what the work of it is, if that's part of the question, is
Yes, of
that
course.
you have to put everything that it can be in your voice. As opposed to if you're on stage and you're doing, people can see your hands and they know what you're doing, your physicality and it. For voice work in general, but specifically for that project, you have to, excuse me, take all the character elements that you want people to feel and to relate to, and you have to find a way to filter them into your voice performance, you know.
Mhm.
And I always like to tell people, people laugh at me because I said one of my favorite, probably my favorite movie is The Exorcist, and not because it's scary and the green pea soup and all that. The reason that it's my favorite movie is because of the voice work of Mercedes McCambridge,
Mhm.
who, of course, was an Academy Award winning actress, but she did the voice of the demon in the film. And for whatever reason, I always separated. I always thought, listen to that woman. Look at what she's doing. She, to me, is what scared the hell out of everybody
Mhm.
because she, again, had all that intention and narrative, blah, 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 in her voice. In her voice. And I had a quick story. I ran into her, believe it or not, at a mall in La Jolla. What? And I'm walking along and I go, that's Mercedes McCambridge. And I thought, are you going to run across Mercedes McCambridge again? Probably not. Go up to her and tell her how much you appreciate it. So as I approached her, you know, she's in a mall in La Jolla. She's not looking for somebody to go, so Miss Mercedes McCambridge, I think you're so one. And I told her, I said, I just wanted to, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I couldn't let the opportunity go by. That's how I opened. I said, but I want to tell you that I think your voice work in The Exorcist is some of the most brilliant acting I've ever experienced.
Mm.
Well, that piqued her interest, you know, and she said, oh, I said, yes. I said, because for me, it wasn't like I'm doing this voice to scare you. You were exhibiting some sort of pain and some sort of, you wanted to get out. You were like trapped, you know? And she grabbed my arm and she said, you understand. I thought, oh my God. But we then started talking. I told her, you know, some of the things I had done. And she says, oh, so you do. And she said, she goes, it was a challenge. She said, because she'd been used to acting with her face and acting with her body in film, you know. And when they asked her, I guess they asked to do, she said, The Exorcist, she said, I'm not going to be seen. How do they? And they said, no, we want you to give a performance as if you were going to be seen. Put everything in it, and then we'll do with, you know. And Linda Blair was someone I know as well. And it was a little bit of a toss-up. She got an Academy Award nomination, Mercedes McCambridge, in the beginning. I don't think they even credited her. They wanted it to be this disembodied kind of. And to me, I always use that when I talk to groups or whatever as an example of what you do when you're doing voice work. Because you can go back and you can look at the movie and you don't realize what you're really taking in psychologically is the voice work and the acting that she's doing with her voice, you know. And that's my example. I always think about when I do anything or have done anything subsequently, I think, well, you know, make sure you're putting in your voice, even if it's going to be animated or they're going to do something with the visual, make sure, because oftentimes the visual is what you do. They'll film you while you're doing it, and the kind of stuff you do while you're recording, they incorporate that into the animation. So in a sense, it is you, even though it's animated, because I mean, when I saw Nightmare Before Christmas, there were things that I said, oh my God, that's me. Things that Oogie would do, you know, as the character in the film, but they incorporated it in. But it all starts with your voice.
Well, the question had to be asked because I know we have some participants who would not forgive me if I didn't show one of your live performances of Boogie Boogie Song.
Oh, okay.
The original Mr. Oogie Boogie himself, Mr. Ken Page.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to do the best I can. The sound of a nice to me is music in here.
I
Good
must say,
times.
I am also of the generation that I love your performance in All Dogs Go to Heaven of Let's Make Music Together.
Yeah, with Burt Reynolds, sure.
Yes. You have also now moved into a phase of your career where you're doing a lot of directing and teaching. As you're taking on that work, and a lot of it's, bigger musical, but what from the cabaret perspective do you bring in as you're working with students or with casts that you're directing?
Well, truth. That's
Mhm.
always that's the common element in everything, as far as I'm concerned. In a sort of master class situation, that is because I think, look, if you don't have truth in theater and film, that is the one thing that is common to everything,
Mhm.
in my opinion. If you're not honest and truthful on film, it doesn't work because the camera doesn't lie. So you can't, and that's why you name actors and actresses, or actors, as we say now, who are brilliant. It's because they have a way of revealing truth
Mhm.
and playing a character in the process, which is not an easy thing to do. Most people, especially in the theater, you put on things, right? In film, you have to strip away things, and yet you're still having to create another person than who you are. That's why I think we know Meryl Streep is such a brilliant actress, because she embodies these people to the level of truth that you cannot deny their reality. Same thing with Viola Davis. I just saw The Woman King, and my God, but it's the truth. And, that's not Viola Davis.
Mhm.
That's the truth of who that character is. But the truth is the thing that makes it believable in film. Same thing in the theater to a different degree. So I tell, students, make sure you know what your intention is. Whatever the form that you're dealing with, film, TV, whatever, theater or cabaret, make sure you know what your intention is. What is it you're trying to communicate? Start there. If you don't start anywhere, start there, because that will lead you wherever you need to go. That's my thought. In directing, which I love, it's the same thing, isn't it? I say to the cast of whatever I've done, first of all, who are you? And it's interesting sometimes the look you get. Well, I'm Billy Bigelow. I'm Nell Carter. I'm whatever. And I say, okay, yeah, but who is that? I said, look, this is not a test. I just want you to be sure you know who you are before you start being that in this show, because otherwise, for me, my stickling point is I don't believe it.
Mhm.
Somebody go, oh, who the how's you? I go, well, that was really great, but I didn't believe it. So let's go back and see how we can make it believable. You've got all the outer edges going, and you've got all the showy parts. Let's make it believable, because there's nothing to me like in cabaret, film, theater, you name it, on a recording, like somebody giving you joy or breaking your heart with their truth, whether it's the truth of the character, or in cabaret, the truth of you as the individual. That is what communicates from human to human, is the truth. Everything else is something else. And I think when people buy a performance or they love seeing somebody, that's that unnameable thing that is nameable, that's happening between the audience and the performer, is truth.
Do you think that sense of self and truth is why, and we talked about this a little bit before we started this evening when it was just you and I, why some performers struggle in the art form of cabaret?
Sure, I think that's one of the reasons. Cabaret is not easy because, again, you can't hide behind anything. And I think there's a misunderstanding among some, and nothing against them, but they come into cabaret to show off. They come into it to go, look at me, see how great I am. And that's fine. But to me, it's always, if you've done a great job, people are going to look at you. If you're amazing, they're going to say, look how great you are. But the thing you want to come in with is a purpose. You want to come in with a truth or a purpose or an intention or something. I mean, it's a different thing with like rock and roll. They're up there to entertain you.
Right.
And even then, the people that we think the most of, even in that genre, are people that come on and they give you that truth. You think of Tina Turner for all of the fire and the things that she is, there's a truth at the core of her that can get right to the heart of you. You can name many, many people like that, but it's a different thing and it skewers in a different direction. But that's what I always think, when I see somebody in the first 5 minutes, I can tell if they're going to give me a show that I can come into, or if they're going to do a show that I sit back and let it all, I like to come in. That's my thing. If I want something to wash over me, I know where to go get that. Cabaret isn't necessarily the place for me.
Well, that's where the magic happens in the art form.
I think so.
Is when when you're doing something that the audience has to lean in for. They have to be in that moment with you.
Right.
We talked about some artists when you were first starting out. Are there artists who are out there now that you think exemplify that lean in moment? We mentioned Miss May, we mentioned Natalie Douglas. Are there others in the scene or in the cabaret world now that you're like, they're doing the thing?
Yes. And I'm trying to think who would come to mind right away. And I'm having a little bit of because of names float around my head these days. But yeah, I just saw Ben Jones last Friday at the Blue Strawberry here in St. Louis, which has become a very noted cabaret room here. And there was a level of truth in a lot of what he did that was really terrific. Like I said, seeing Amanda McBroom, people that are artists, they're not just performers. They're artists in the world of cabaret. They do it so well, and you can go to them and it's a masterclass because that's all they're going to give you is the real deal. They don't have anything, they don't do anything else. That's what they do. I'm trying to think of somebody else. I saw Clint Holmes sang New York State of Mind at this benefit, and he has a wonderful intimacy. I've never seen him in a cabaret setting, but he has a wonderful intimacy about the way he performs and the way he brings you in, because it's quiet and it's intimate, and you have to come into it, like I said, I can't think of anybody else right off the top of my head, but there are many. But there are a lot of people, because look, a lot of the people that go into doing cabaret, it's because they want to do that. There's a percentage, like I said, who go into because they want to show off of what they can do, and I can sing this and I can do, and that's okay. But there are the other people who go into it to express themselves as artists. And that's what's always so great, We were talking earlier about listening to Barbara at the Bonsoir, which just came out. And you listen to it and you think, well, no wonder she became the star she became, because in every song is like a whole play. Yeah. You talked about the lyrics and the intention. Sleep and Be, Have a True Love, Stay Too Long at the Fair, song after song after song after song is a whole world unto itself.
Hearing her do some of the songs, I think there's 2 songs from the Fantastics she does on the album.
Yes, first time I heard, and I do Soon It's Gonna Rain in my show, and I couple it with a song from Frank Lesser from Green Willow, Summertime Love, which I also love. I've been doing for years. Soon It's Gonna Rain, I just started doing not too long ago, but the first couple of times that I heard it, Soon It's Gonna Rain was Barbra Streisand's first time I heard it. I didn't even know it was from the Fantastics. It was on one of her early albums. I didn't know the show, right? And I heard her sing that. I heard Harry Belafonte sing Try to Remember, on one of his albums. And I did not know these were from a Broadway show, or from a show, I should say, off Broadway, until way later. But the story of it always connected to me. That idea that we'll find a place just for us, some intimate place where we can be, and then we'll let it rain. We can reign forever, but we're in there with each other inside our own 4 walls. What a great, and the rendition that she does is so simple and direct. I love her Much More, which is a hard song to sing if it's no truth in it. It doesn't make any sense to sing it if you're not coming from someplace that's really truth. To see somebody sing it who's a little jaded around the edges going, I'd like to swim in a clear blue stream. It's like, I think you've been in a few streams, right? I think you have been in a few streams already, But to see someone who can find that, even if they're not that anymore, that can find that in themselves again and make you believe that there's still that clear and clean. It's great to see that.
Sadly, we're quickly approaching the end of my time to ask you questions before I turn it over to the audience.
Yes.
So of course I have to ask you, what are you working on now? What's coming up for you?
Well, the immediate thing that's coming up December 10th and 11th. No, 9th and 10th. I'm at Wembley Arena, the absolute opposite of Cabaret, but we do, as you saw there, we sing the score to Nightmare Before Christmas live to the film with the symphony orchestra. And we'll be there at Wembley for 2 nights in London. That's coming up more immediately. And then I'm going to try to kind of take a break. I've been doing a lot of wonderful things. I did the Mabel Mercer Cabaret Conference.
Which you were so fantastic that evening.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was good to see you that night. But a lot of things. I just did this benefit in Palm Springs, one night only, Michael Childers thing there. And a lot of, again, wonderful people, Debbie Shapiro and Clint Holmes and all kind of great people. So I said, I'm going to take a little break when I get to December. And then in May 4th, a year to the date, I play 54 Below again. And I'm very excited to do it because at first, I hadn't done a cabaret show in New York in a while. So it was a big deal to get back there and do it. And now I've been doing a lot more, but I'm very excited to return to 54 Below and do basically that show again, but there'll be some additions and things. So that's what's coming up, and that's a long range. But I'm sort of, and you never know what's going to come up.
You never know when the email's going to come through or
absolutely
the phone's going to ring with the next idea.
That's right. And I'm always up for it. Whatever I have plays I've written that I talked to someone about in Palm Springs, a piece that I wrote called Sublime Intimacy, which is a play with dance. It's about a dancer and dancers, or people who love dancers, and the intimate relationships that they've had. that they've had. And I'm fingers crossed going to get to do that out in Palm Springs. I'm talking to some people there. And, whatever. I have another show I should mention called Café Chanson. And I mention it because it is set in a cabaret. And we did it in a theater here in St. Louis, but we built a cabaret in the theater because it's supposed to be a French bloc cabaret. And it takes place, and the show is done all over the room, so to speak. So I'm hoping, knock wood, I can do that again as well.
Fantastic! I would love to see
that one. Yeah, it's evocative. I must say, I'd like to see it myself again.
Well, I have one more clip, but before I show that,
yes,
every edition of Cabaret Conversations, and we're in our 3rd year now, every edition has ended with the same question.
Yes,
and that is, in a sentence or two, what is cabaret?
To me, cabaret is the open, clear channel between a performer and an audience, with music or spoken word, because oftentimes that's part of it as well. It's the open, clear channel from heart to heart. That's what I would say. I could go on forever, of course, but in a sentence or two, the open, clear channel in art, in song, in lyric, from heart to heart.
That's a great answer. We've got one more clip for this evening. I had more, but then we talked so much. I've enjoyed it so much that we haven't gotten to all the clips, but
that's okay.
Everyone has YouTube and Google, so they can find some of these as well. The one I'm going to show is you from the American Songbook Association Gala from a couple of years back.
I don't want no opera, no cha-cha or mambo. My baby's gone and left me. Now I'm feeling mighty low. Mr. Piano Man, play me some down home blues. It's a story that's old, can only be told with the blues. Let your left hand play my misery, your right hand play When she left, she took the sunshine, left me standing in the rain. Mr. Piano Man, play me some down home blues. Let me stand here and brood. I'm just in the mood for the blues. Oh! Mr. Piano Man, and now you know how I feel. Mr. Piano Man, you know her love wasn't real. When a love affair ends, a man's best friend is the blues. Mr. Piano Man, some down home
That, as has been all evening, was the fantastic Mr. Ken Page. To our audience, if you have a question, you can turn your camera on and wave, and I'll invite you to unmute, or you can send it to me via chat. Leslie, I see that your camera's on. Do you have something you'd like to say? You can go ahead and unmute, and I'll add you.
Okay, I was off and on. I'm in the Catskills. I am just uber fanning out. I just love your voice. I melt. I love that you said it was an heart-to-heart experience. So I don't really have anything to say except for gushing over you. And thank you so much for doing this and for sharing your personal story and your journey. It's so inspiring. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
totally nerding out over this. Very exciting.
Big hug to you. Big hug to you.
Thank you, Leslie. A question has come into the chat. Is there something that you think was in the scene when you were starting in the 70s that is missing from it now?
I would answer that by saying I think there's so many things that have happened since then that are part of what's now. I wouldn't say there's something missing necessarily. You can't go through an AIDS epidemic without it changing the landscape of everything, without it changing the landscape of your spirit and your heart. And now we're X amount of years, quote unquote, past that, but it remains part of what is the, I don't know, the heart language, maybe, something like that. But I don't know that there's something missing. I just think we're in a different time, and the soil that the thing grows out of is different. It's just different. I don't know if there's something missing, but it definitely is different. I mean, in New York in the early 70s, as many know now, was in a crisis. It was financially in debt and all these kind of things were going on. But as it has been in Berlin or it has been in Paris or wherever, that environment always gives rise to the artist expressing themselves because you're expressing beyond and above the obvious circumstances that you're in. So I think we're kind of in another time like that. So maybe we're not missing something, we're gaining something in a sort of weird way that's giving us impetus to get out there and express again.
I like that. Another question coming in, so I'll add into our spotlight here. Our dear friend Carolyn.
Hi, Ken. It's Carolyn Montgomery. How are
Hi, hello, honey.
Hi,
The person who introduced the two of us.
Yes. Oh, how nice to see you.
Well, you're seeing me in my kitchen, sweaty and a mess.
Where I'd like to be with you. You know, we have a meal that we promised that we're going to have together.
And it's going to happen.
I'm closer.
It's going to happen in May. And Tuscany, yes.
Yes.
I just made, yes, my son is coming home from college tomorrow. And so I'm filling the refrigerator with everything.
Yeah, mama's cooking.
I kind of like him pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ken, this is my question for you.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I've always wanted to ask it of you. First of all, I'd like you, I've been having trouble sleeping, and I'd just like you to come and sit by my bedside and say words like the epitome of the cabaret idiom. You're just, the way you speak just lulls me and soothes me so well.
Oh, bless you. The epitome.
That is not my question, though. Very quickly, years and years, like 20 years ago, I met Angela Lansbury, and we were chatting, and we talked, and we were talking about the authenticity of cabaret as opposed to theater, and on and on. Quick conversation. Years later, she did come and she saw me do a show, and we went out afterwards. I feel incredibly lucky. Yes. And she said to me, and I never forgot this. She said to me, "Honey, I know you're feeling absolutely everything you're singing, and it does come through about 70% of the time." And I said, "But I don't want to be acting." And she said, oh, sweetheart, it's all acting. It's just acting within what you know. If you don't know it, you can't sing it. But if you do, let it loose, honey. Let us see it in your face. So,
I think that's true.
I do too. And I had an experience the other night where I'm bringing Rosie Clooney. This is not about me, but I went and I did 2 tunes and I did a little acting and the audience flipped out. And I wonder, we're all talking about feeling your feelings and deep authenticity. All that's true. I can tell somebody who's just up there barfing up a lung, singing high notes forever. Right. And I just don't care.
Right.
But the truth is, there's got to be a way to communicate it to the audience. You have to have the face, and a lot of people get up there and think, because I feel it.
That's not enough. Yeah.
It's not enough. It's
No,
not
it's
enough
not
to
enough.
feel it. You have to communicate it. And that's the piece that is very frequently missing, I think.
Well, you know, in the end, like, to agree with Miss Lansbury, who oh my God, I can tell when we talk private, I'll tell you about my experience.
We got stories to tell.
Yeah, but it's a craft.
It absolutely is.
And learning, to me, learning how to, as she said, yes, it's acting, but it's acting in truth. It's using the fuel and the fodder of yourself and your own thoughts and feelings and blah, blah, to do that thing. And in that way, I would agree that it's acting. But also, if you don't have it, like she said, if you don't know it, you can't, you know,
exactly.
there are songs that I do now that I acted well early on, you know, because I thought, but now I don't have to act, I have to be.
I know exactly
what
you mean.
The truth of it comes through, and that's the craft of, to me, cabaret.
Yeah.
You know?
The greatest way our conversation ended about that, and we started talking about other more fun things, was, darling, I know it's in there, and I know you've been round. Been round.
I love it.
Me basically, you've been ridden hard.
Honey, and put away wet. I love only the English. You've been round.
You've been round. And I thought, I have been round. And I'm going to show people I'm going to do a little acting.
And you know what? That's part of it, isn't it? That's why you see someone like Marilyn Maye and you realize, my God, that all the experiences that she brings into. She's
That's
been
right.
round,
Yeah, she's been round.
you know? I'm going to
I'm
keep
so
that. I
glad
love
to see
that.
you, and I can't wait to see you again.
Oh, bless you. And thank you for everything you've done to help me along the way. You know, I appreciate it deeply.
You need no help. We just hang our star on yours and watch where it goes.
Thank you, sweetheart. I adore you. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you, and you too. Have a lovely Thanksgiving.
Mwah.
Thank you, Caroline.
Mwah. Thanks. Thank you.
Oh, and that brings us to time for tonight. I can't believe it. It feels to me like it has gone so fast. I feel like we could have talked for another hour about this art form, and maybe I'll invite myself to that dinner in May and we can talk about it more.
Exactly.
One housekeeping note before we say goodbye this evening. Cabaret Conversations will be back in 2 weeks. We're doing it early next month because of the holiday. And I will be joined by the wonderful Leroy Reams as my guest.
Leroy, we were just together in Palm Springs. It was
I
our big
saw
reunion.
the photos on Facebook. I was jealous.
Yes, I adore Leroy. And has he got stories about it all?
Oh, he does.
Yes.
So please join us for that. But I cannot thank enough my guest for this month, the legendary Mr. Ken Page. It has been such a joy to sit and chat with you about this art form that we both love this evening. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and a privilege to get to talk about it, you know?
And thank you to our audience for joining us. I hope we'll see you again for another edition of Cabaret Conversations. Have a great night, everybody.